This is the first in a series of tested videos that are going to be tackling the ACT mathematics test. This particular video is going to be giving you a simple overview of what the test looks like, and strategies are going to be useful for answering no matter what sort of mathematics test question you come across. The subsequent videos, however, are going to be getting into more of the nitty-gritty of each type of question and trying to figure out what the challenges that each type of question brings up are, and then also how to avoid falling trapped to them. My name is Carlos Cousins. I am a testive coach, teacher, and at this point, ACT college prep guru of sorts. Um, and I'm here just to give you a big warm welcome into the journey that is your preparation for the ACT math test. Um, Now, if you're sitting there watching this video with your hands in your mouth, biting your nails, thinking, oh my God, I'm not good at math. How is this video possibly going to help me? And you look a little bit like this lady that is completely frightened by the concept of numbers. Don't let that affect how you will do on this test. A lot of preparation for the mathematics section of this test is really practice. It is a very repetitive test. You'll see the same sorts of questions come up over and over, and just doing those questions, understanding how they work, is all that you need to do. A lot of people that would not call themselves math people will score a 36 in this section because they've put the time and the practice into it that they need to succeed. Of course, while you go through these videos, we will talk about the conceptual understanding that you need in order to not only do well on the questions you'll be presented with in this exam, but really any time that you're presented with um, I guess, real life geometry problems and the sort of thing that you might see in college, or real life algebra, or real life trig, or real life whatever. Um, but yeah, the point here is for this test, you don't have to be mad at math. You can be like this really awkward picture of that little kid that somehow happens to be amazing at well, that looks like algebra, multiplication, addition, subtraction, and tests, even though he cannot be older than 5 years old. Um, but anyhow, what is this test about? So the test in a nutshell here. The ACT Mathematics test is a 60 question, 60-minute test, which is going to evaluate your understanding of literally all of the concepts that you have been learning for high school mathematics up to pre-calc or trig, depending on the course that you've taken. So what are we testing specifically? So that means we're testing pre-algebra and elementary algebra, intermediate algebra, coordinate geometry, and well, the connection there is while you learn algebra, you usually go over how to graph the equations that are shown you. So we're talking about geometry on an XY grid, the traditional graphing that you've seen for algebra. And then, of course, plane geometry and trigonometry. So that usually means your geometry course at the beginning of high school and your pre-calculus trig course by the end of high school. And then also, of course, your ability to implement basic formulas and computational skills, which is a skill that's a little bit, um, I guess, harder to place in a specific math class. Is something you should have developed through your entire K through 12 education. Just how you do with computation in general. Now, note that not all of the information needed to answer the questions is provided on the booklet. There will be, especially for the geometry and trig questions, a lot of formulas that are not going to be provided to you that are going to be expected of you to know. And that are going that the best test to the best way to prepare for this test is really by just doing ACT math questions, really solving enough ACT math questions correctly that you feel that you can do it on the exam under the time constraints. So the next part here, what does the ACT math look like on Testive? So much like on the real exam, you're going to have just a question here posed for you. If a and b are positive integers, here for example, and 8 times 2 to the a equals 2 to the b, what is a in terms of b? And the way that you pick the answer choice is you just click on the right answer within the gray boxes you're provided, and actually you also have the option underneath. You see those white boxes with the X's through them. When you click on one of those empty white boxes, the x's appear, and that's just a way for you to signal to yourself that you don't believe that that's the right answer choice. Is equivalent to crossing out that answer choice, since that's not easy to do on the site. And we've crossed out 3 wrong answer choices here for those of you that are interested. The way that you solve this particular problem, 8 can be expressed as 2 to the third, right? And if you know anything about the multiplication of exponents, you have 2 to the a multiplied here by 2 to the third, which gives you 2 to the 3 plus a, and this equals 2 to the b. So what you can do then is ignore the 2's and just worry about the exponents. You have 2 plus 3 equals b, so all that you do is you subtract 3 from both sides, and you have a equals b minus 3, and that ends up being the right answer. But anyway, what is the ACT's approach to the math test? So the makers of the ACT say that the ACT math test actually isn't about um, measuring your ability with extensive computation. You can use a calculator, and it's definitely not supposed to measure your comfort with complex formulas. Now, the key word here is complex. You will have to know a lot of formulas. Especially for the trig section, your Pythagorean identities, for example, and things of the sort. Uh, but the makers of the ACT say that they do want to test 6 content areas, and this is why knowing certain formulas and I guess certain mathematical facts is key. They're testing your knowledge of pre-algebra, elementary algebra, like we said earlier, which is roughly algebra 1, intermediate algebra, roughly algebra 2, coordinate geometry, which is part of algebra, what you would have learned in algebra in school, plane geometry, which is a lot more what you would have done in a geometry class early on in your high school career, and trigonometry, which is something that you usually learn along with pre-calculus or in a course that you would take immediately before you would start taking calculus. So these are the content areas that the ACT is measuring. Now, what exactly does this mean? And how do they then categorize each of these? So they do this in they make these 6 content areas, then they divide them into 2, I guess, umbrella categories. So you have algebra coordinate geometry as a category. And this then is comprised of pre-algebra questions, which make up 20 to 25% of these algebra coordinate geometry problems. And for this, you need to understand things that hopefully by the end of high school have become very familiar. So whole numbers, decimals, fractions, integers, place value. Now this here, scientific notation, is something that people tend to struggle with. Through high school, but it's something that we will be discussing in subsequent videos. Ratios, percentages, linear equations, absolute value, and analysis. 15 to 20% of the questions will be on elementary algebra, so exponent and square root properties, like in the previous example we looked at, substitution, functional relationships, and factoring. 15 to 20 are also going to be covering intermediate algebra, so the quadratic formula, rational and radical expressions, absolute value equations or inequalities, functions, modeling, matrices, roots of polynomials, and complex numbers. And then the last section will be a coordinate geometry section, and this is going to make 20 to 25% of the of this section of the math test. And these are testing your knowledge of graphing equations, so points, lines, polynomials, circles, etc. Graphing inequalities, slope, parallel and perpendicular lines, distance, midpoint, and conics. This is a lot of information, and it can seem very daunting to look at it in the abstract like this. Um, but we'll get through what this means specifically. The other umbrella term they have is plane geometry or trigonometry. And this is going to make up, the plane geometry is going to make up 20 to 25% of the mathematics test. And it is plane figures, angles as they relate to perpendicular, parallel lines, properties of circles, triangles, rectangles, parallelograms, trapezoids. The concept of proofs and proof techniques is going to be touched upon. I was going to have to be touched upon in order for you to understand how some of these questions work, and volume. And then trig. And trig is the smallest section by far. It'll be 5 to 10% at most of the test. And of course, this is measuring right triangle relations. graphing and modeling of trigonometric functions, your trig identities, solving trig equations. Um, so quick question: can you remember any of what I just said? And that's the problem with listing all this information out, like I just did, or like the sites of the ACT site, for example, does. And this is where Testa comes in. So it's really important to note a few things. The ACT math test questions are going to test more than one skill per question at a time. They can test any number of the aforementioned skills and subskills at the exact same time. So just like for any other test, every multiple choice question is going to have distractor options, and it's best to develop familiarity with each ACT math test skill by doing ACT math test questions targeting those skills. You need to remember that of course sitting there and memorizing all the skills you need to master is obviously going to be difficult and scary, and it's not something that I recommend that you do. What you need to do instead is focus on getting testing experience, employing all of those skills simultaneously. uh, and this is what Testive is great at offering. Right now you're under the lessons tab. Just a quick click over to the practice tab to the left is going to provide you with a whole bunch of questions that are going to be targeting specific math test skills. And really practicing, seeing which questions you get wrong, and thinking about why you get them wrong and how to change that in the future is what's key to you improving your score. Um, Now, Testive is going to group ACT math questions a little bit differently. We're not going to be using all of these categories and all of these different skills quite like the ACT wants people to think about them. We're going to just very simply divide them into three skills. So geometry and trig, which is something that you're used to from the way that classes are divided in high school. Algebra, which is going to include the pre-algebra, elementary and intermediate algebra, or what you would have learned in algebra 1 and algebra 2, as well as the coordinate geometry, of course. And then numbers, which is just going to be general skills, like ratios, or you know what whole numbers are, basic addition and subtraction, things that you should have learned just over the course of your K through 12 education, in a separate category. So, for example, if you consider this particular geometry and trig question, we have here, if u plus v equals pi over 2, find the value of sine squared of u plus sine squared of v, and use the figure above. It turns out the figure here happens to be below, but the answer choices are provided there. And if you think about it, this question is not just requiring you to understand some trig identity. This question requires you to understand whole numbers, obviously, fractions, ratios, right triangle properties, and trig functions. These are skill spanning three ACT categories, straddling numbers, algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. So really, dividing these questions up into those categories isn't really as helpful as getting practice pulling from all of the skills that you need to answer all sorts of math questions at the same time for every sort of math question. So like it says here, rather than rule out the use of other skills per question type, you need to get practice pulling from the wealth of skills that are going to be measured by the test. Um, so just a quick thing here on dissecting word problems. Something that a lot of people don't pay attention to is, before approaching any multiple choice question, you should really, really carefully read and understand the question. There's going to be some distractor. There might be a knot that you could easily miss, and be on the lookout for all of the givens. So what information is actually provided to you? Underline these givens, mark them in some fashion so that you don't lose track of them, and then translate them into math language. If it isn't given to you in the form of an equation, or in the form of a variable, if you just got some unknown that you don't know, make sure that you assign a variable to it. Make sure that you figure out what equation to use. Identify what the question is asking for. So what are we looking for in this question? What is the unknown? Locate and mark those as well. And they're not always the answer. A lot of the time, the unknowns are necessary for you to figure out another unknown, another answer. But make sure that you don't get stuck on, oh, I found a missing value, this has to be the answer choice, because that will be an attractor option very often. Watch out for distractors in the framing of the question. So like I said earlier, sometimes they'll ask you for which answer choice is not valid. And then, of course, keep in mind what is essential in answering the question. They might give you extra information that's not completely necessary for you to get your math problem correct. And if you're not, um, I guess, assigning the right value to the things that are important, you might get distracted by information that is unimportant. So draw a picture and label some more. It's a really good idea to include all givens in a table or diagram for a problem that you seem to be struggling a little bit more with. And this is going to help you distinguish relevant from irrelevant information to a specific question type. So um, this is especially important to answer geometry and algebra questions. If you're going through an algebra question and you're not quite sure what variable you should be solving for, uh, unless you make a table or draw a diagram that's going to really make sure that you keep track of all of the values that you have, you're going to be very confused. If you get a geometry problem where you're not really sure of what shapes you should be looking at, or um, specifically what type of triangle the triangle using, what formulas you should be thinking about, you're not going to get um, the correct answer choice as often as you could otherwise. But keep in mind that while this isn't a reading comprehension test, understanding the questions asked of you is key to avoiding these attractors. The process of elimination is always important, but especially for this test. Don't waste time with the math. If you can test the answer choices with plugging something in, a lot of the time students try to um, I guess rather than looking at the answer choices and seeing, well, which of these makes the most sense, um, can I plug any of these answers in? Can I test these answer choices to see which is the right answer? They may waste a lot of time trying to on their own and see if their answer matches one of the answer choices provided. Of course, that is a good approach if you cannot figure out which answer choice is the best simply by looking at the answer choices. Um, and of course, think. So, what formulas or skills do I need to solve this problem? That's something that you should always ask yourself before looking at any of the answer choices. Just after reading the question, what exactly does it look like that they're testing? And can the answer choices lead me in the right direction is the second thing you should look at. Only then think about, well, how can I solve it on my own? This is going to save you a lot of precious time. And of course, as with all ACT tests, difficult questions are interspersed with easier ones, and there's no penalty for a wrong response. So attempting all questions is in your best interest. And if you don't have time to finish, it is definitely better to guess than to omit. This is very different from the SAT, and just a small reminder for those of you that may be confused. Um, Now, I'm not going to say good luck with this section, but much like I've been doing for every other test that we've looked at, I will say good fortune. I've got a very nice fortune cookie here that tells you that you will be rewarded for your efforts. And that is exactly what the case is for this test. It's not really about luck. And if you continue to feel afraid about how you'll perform on this section, just think about this fortune. Think about if you put the effort that you need into this test, you will reap the results. And now, as I've been doing with the other tests as well, I'll leave you with a question. Got a pop quiz question right here. The answer will be provided in a subsequent video that is going to be discussing this sort of problem in the near future. But yeah, feel free to stop the video here, solve the problem, and then check in the following videos whether or not you got the right answer. I hope that this is helpful. Happy prepping.